After 15 years of silence, the miracle of hearing again should have been the happiest moment of my life. Instead, the first words I heard were my son Barrett, telling his wife Jessica how sick he was of taking care of a disabled old man, and that it was time to deal with the situation once and for all. I kept my eyes closed in that hospital bed, letting them think I was still their helpless deaf burden. They were planning my funeral while I was still breathing, but they had no idea I was about to plan theirs. Comment below with where you're from and hit that subscribe button. What my family did next while thinking I couldn't hear them will shock you even more. The screech of metal against asphalt was the last thing I remembered before everything went black. When I opened my eyes in that sterile hospital room at Colorado Springs General, I expected silence. After 15 years of living in a soundless world, silence had become my normal. What I didn't expect was to hear my son Barrett's voice cutting through the air like a rusty blade. "I'm just tired, Jess. Tired of babysitting a disabled old man who can't even hear us anymore." The words hit harder than the pickup truck that had T-boned my Ford. I lay perfectly still, eyes barely cracked open, watching Barrett pace, while Jessica sat scrolling through her phone. "The doctors say he's stable," Jessica replied without looking up. "But honestly, this might be a blessing in disguise. Maybe now we can finally make some decisions about his living situation." A blessing in disguise. My accident, a blessing. I should have been celebrating. For the first time since that construction site explosion took my hearing, 15 years ago, I could actually hear human voices. The miracle I'd prayed for had finally happened. But instead of joy, all I felt was the cold realization that my own family saw me as nothing more than a burden. "The ranch is too much for him anyway," Barrett continued. 5 acres, that old house falling apart. He's 62, been deaf for over a decade, and now this accident. Face it, he needs professional care. Professional care? That's what they called warehousing old folks these days. I'd built that ranch with my own hands in 1992. Every board and nail placed with dreams of leaving something solid for my family. After my wife Sarah died, that land became my sanctuary. Now they were discussing it like real estate to be liquidated. "What about the kids?" Jessica asked, finally putting down her phone. "Tommy and Emma adore their grandfather. They'll understand," Barrett said, though his voice lacked conviction. "And honestly, it's not like he can really interact with them anyway. The communication barrier makes everything complicated." Communication barrier. Is that what I'd become? Not their father and grandfather, but an obstacle to overcome. The heart monitor beside my bed continued its steady beeping, but inside my pulse was racing. I'd survived a collision, miraculously regained my hearing, and discovered my family discussing my future like I was already dead. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could finally hear again, but the first conversation made me wish I was still deaf. A nurse entered, shoes squeaking against linoleum. "How's our patient doing?" "Still unconscious," Barrett replied quickly. "The doctor said it might be a while before he comes around." I kept my breathing steady, face relaxed. Something told me staying unconscious might be the smartest decision I'd made in years. If they thought I couldn't hear them, maybe I'd finally learn what my family really thought about their disabled old man. "I'll check on him in a few hours," the nurse said. Sometimes these things take time. After she left, Jessica stood and stretched. "I need coffee. This is going to be a long day." "Go ahead," Barrett said. "I'll stay with him for a while." As their footsteps faded, I opened my eyes just enough to see Barrett staring out the window at the Colorado mountains. My son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer who'd helped me build our family's future, was planning to tear it all down. But they had no idea what kind of mistake they'd just made. You don't spend 30 years in construction without learning that the strongest foundations are built to withstand any storm. And this old man was about to show them just how solid his foundation really was. The game had changed. I could hear every word now, and they were about to discover that their silent, helpless father had been listening all along. 3 days after I left the hospital, Barrett and Jessica moved into my ranch to help with recovery. They'd transformed my living room into a medical station. Pill organizers on the coffee table and an unnecessary wheelchair in the corner. Enough supplies to stock a clinic. "Dad, we're here to take care of everything," Barrett announced, exaggerating his mouth movements like he'd done for 15 years. "You don't need to worry about anything." I nodded gratefully, the same gesture I'd perfected over the years. Inside, I was fascinated by this sudden devotion. In 5 years, Barrett had visited, maybe once monthly staying, just long enough for Sunday dinner, before finding excuses to leave. Now he was playing devoted son with Oscar-worthy performance. Jessica bustled around my kitchen like she owned it, reorganizing cabinets and muttering about how I'd been letting things go. She'd never cared about my housekeeping before, but suddenly she was Marie Kondo, with a mission. "Edgar, I made you soup," she said, placing Campbell's chicken noodle before me with exaggerated care. "You need to keep your strength up." That evening, as I pretended to nap in my recliner, I heard Jessica on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was different when she thought I couldn't hear. Sharper, more businesslike. "No, Mom, he's fine physically. The accident wasn't serious. Just bruising and mild concussion." She paused. "I know, but we need to be here. There are things we need to assess." Assess. Interesting word choice. Barrett joined her, and their conversation dropped to whispers. I cracked one eye open, watching them huddle like conspirators. "Did you check the office?" Jessica asked quietly. "Not yet. He's been awake most of the day. We need to wait until he's sleeping soundly." Check the office. My home office was just an old desk where I paid bills and kept important papers. What could they need to check? "What about the safe?" Jessica whispered. I saw it behind the bookshelf, but I don't know the combination." My blood ran cold. They were discussing my safe, like they had every right to access it. The safe containing my will insurance policies and ranch deed. Documents that were none of their business unless I was dead or declared incompetent. "We need to be smart about this," Barrett continued. "If we move too fast, people might ask questions." "I know, but we can't wait too long either. The longer this drags out, the more complicated it gets." I forced my breathing steady as they checked on me, ensuring their patient was properly sedated. "He looks peaceful," Jessica whispered. "Good. Tomorrow we'll start going through his papers. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with here. What we're dealing with. Not how we can help Dad or what Dad needs. What we're dealing with, like I was a problem to solve rather than a person to care for." As they tiptoed upstairs, I remained still, processing what I'd heard. My devoted son and daughter-in-law weren't here to nurse me back to health. They were conducting reconnaissance, cataloging my assets, figuring out how to claim them. The ranch I'd built with my own hands, savings from 40 years of work, the life I'd constructed after losing my hearing. They saw it all as their inheritance, tired of waiting for me to die to claim it. But they'd made one critical error. They assumed their deaf, helpless father couldn't hear them plotting his downfall. Tomorrow I'd start my own assessment, and unlike them, I wouldn't be whispering. By the second week of their so-called care, Barrett and Jessica had settled into a routine that would have been touching if it weren't so calculated. Every morning brought coffee and patronizing conversation. Every afternoon, fake devotion while I pretended to appreciate their thoughtfulness. But their real work began when they thought I was napping. My old recliner had the perfect angle to observe my home office through the partially open door. From there, I watched them systematically rifle through my life, one document at a time. "Found the insurance policies," Jessica whispered, pulling files from my desk. "Life insurance is $200,000 plus accidental death benefit." "Good," Barrett replied, photographing each page. "What about the property deed?" "Still looking. Everything's organized, but not clearly labeled." They worked with professional efficiency, careful to return everything to its exact position. I had to admire their thoroughness, even as rage burned hotter with each violation. "Here it is," Jessica said, holding up my ranch deed. 5 acres free and clear, worth at least $400,000 in today's market. $400,000. They'd done their homework. "What about liquid assets?" Barrett asked. "That's where it gets interesting." Jessica spread my bank statements across the desk like poker cards. "His pension shows regular deposits, but the balance is lower than it should be." My heart stopped. They were auditing my finances with accountant precision. How much lower? Based on pension payments, he should have around $120,000. Current balance shows only 70. $50,000 missing. Barrett's voice rose before he glanced toward where I lay motionless. Not missing, withdrawn. Large cash withdrawals over 18 months? I knew exactly where that money went. Barrett's struggling business, Emma's private school, Tommy's medical bills. Every withdrawal at Barrett's request, with promises to pay back when things turned around. Jesus, Jess. What if he's been giving money away? What if there's nothing left by the time we... By the time we what? Jessica's voice sharpened. Barrett fell silent, but the implication hung heavy. By the time I died, by the time they could claim their inheritance. We need to find where that money went, Jessica continued, and ensure no more disappears. How without raising suspicions? Simple. We become more involved in his financial management. For his protection, of course. A man his age with his disabilities shouldn't handle large sums alone. My disabilities. 15 years of hearing loss now weaponized against me by my own son. What about power of attorney? Barrett asked. Already researched it. We need him to sign willingly or prove he's mentally incompetent. And if he won't sign, Jessica's pause chilled me more than words. Then we explore other options. Other options? I didn't need details to understand. They were planning to strip my independence piece by piece until I surrendered control completely. As they returned documents to proper places, I remained motionless, processing their betrayal's magnitude. The $50,000 I'd given from love and family loyalty was now evidence I couldn't manage my affairs. But they'd made another critical error. They assumed a deaf old man wouldn't notice money disappearing, wouldn't question their sudden devotion, wouldn't fight back when cornered. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. It wasn't until the third week that I heard the conversation that made my blood turn to ice. Jessica was in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones, while Barrett ran errands. She thought I was napping, but I was wide awake, listening to her destroy my life one phone call at a time. "Yes, this is Jessica Sinclair calling about the incompetency proceedings we discussed," she said, voice crisp and businesslike. "My father-in-law. He's 62, deaf for 15 years, recent car accident." She was being careful not to use my name over the phone, but the clinical tone made it clear this was official business. No, he's not showing dementia, but his judgment has become questionable. Large cash withdrawals, refusing to discuss finances in this accident. We're concerned he can't manage his affairs safely. Every word carefully crafted to paint me as a confused old man, needing protection from his own decisions. The cash withdrawals they'd discovered were twisted into evidence of mental decline rather than family generosity. "What documentation would we need?" Jessica asked, pulling out a notepad. "Medical records, financial statements, witness testimony, and once we establish guardianship, we'd have full authority over his decisions. Full authority, complete control. Timeline is important. How quickly can this move? 6 to 8 weeks, if everything goes smoothly. 6 to 8 weeks. That's how long I had before they could legally strip my independence." After ending that call, Jessica immediately dialed another number. Golden Years Care Facility. "This is Jessica Sinclair. I called about placement for my father-in-law." Her tone shifted to concerned family member. "Yes, the gentleman with hearing loss who had an accident. Golden Years. I knew the place. A sprawling complex outside Colorado Springs that looked more like a prison than a home. We'd like to schedule a tour, preferably this week. We want him in the right environment before his condition deteriorates. Before his condition deteriorates. As if deafness was progressive disease consuming my mind. Thursday at 2 o'clock would be perfect," Jessica said, scribbling notes. "Yes, we'll bring him. We believe in transparency, even if he can't fully understand." Can't fully understand. Already talking about me like a child. "What are costs for long-term care, and that includes meals?" "Medical supervision." "Excellent. We'll discuss payment options. He has assets that need liquidating." "Assets needing liquidation. My ranch savings, life's work. Reduced to billing statement line items." Barrett returned as Jessica finished, and I watched through half-closed eyes as she briefed him. "The lawyer says we need more documentation of incompetence," Jessica reported. "And I scheduled Golden Years tour for Thursday." "This Thursday? That's fast." "We can't wait longer, Barrett. Every day we delay, he could complicate our plans. What if he gives away more money? Changes his will?" "You're right," Barrett agreed. "And honestly, the sooner we settle this, the better. I'm tired of pretending to be the devoted son. Tired of pretending. At least he was honest about something." "After Thursday's tour, we'll have everything in place," Jessica said. "Legal paperwork, facility arrangements, financial planning. By next week's end, this situation will be resolved." Resolved. Like I was a mathematical equation rather than a human being. As they headed upstairs, discussing logistics like military commanders, I remained motionless. Thursday. 4 days before they showed me my future prison and began burying me alive. But they'd made their biggest mistake yet. They'd given me a deadline, a specific target. After 30 years meeting construction deadlines under impossible conditions, I knew exactly how to work under pressure. Thursday would indeed resolve everything, just not how they expected. Over the next several days, I transformed from passive observer to strategic planner. 30 years managing construction projects had taught me that successful demolition requires 3 things: the right tools, perfect timing, and complete understanding of your target's structural weaknesses. My family had just given me a blueprint of all three. First step documentation. While Barrett and Jessica continued their charade of devoted caregivers, I began my covert operation. An old digital recorder tucked behind my recliner's cushion captured every whispered conversation they thought I couldn't hear. "We need to be more aggressive about the timeline," Jessica said during one particularly damning recording. "The longer we wait, the more suspicious this looks." "I know," Barrett replied, "but if anyone questions our motives are pure Barrett. We're protecting a disabled elderly man from his own poor judgment. That's our story. Their story, my evidence. Second step legal reinforcement. Using my bedroom phone while they shopped, I contacted Marcus Thompson, a lawyer whose reputation for protecting elderly clients was legendary in Colorado Springs. His voice was steady, professional, and reassuringly skeptical until I played him selected recordings. "What you're describing constitutes elder financial abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud," Marcus said after a long pause. "How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks since the accident. Financial theft goes back 18 months. We need to move quickly. If they file for emergency guardianship, it becomes much harder to fight. Can you come to my office tomorrow? They think I'm helpless and deaf, Marcus. I'll be there. Third step financial protection. That afternoon, while Barrett and Jessica attended their secret Golden Years meeting, I drove to my bank for the first time in 3 weeks. The teller, Sarah Chen, was shocked to see me walking independently. "Edgar, we heard about your accident. How are you feeling?" I wrote on a notepad, "Much better than my family thinks. I need account changes." Within an hour, I'd transferred my life savings to a new bank with two-factor authentication. I also updated beneficiaries, removing Barrett and Jessica entirely, adding Tommy and Emma as primary inheritors, with Marcus as trustee. Fourth step, strategic planning. Back home, I sat in my workshop where I'd taught Barrett to use tools and laid out my counterattack like a foreman planning complex demolition. They wanted to use my deafness against me. I'd use their assumption of helplessness to destroy them. They wanted to steal my money, already moved beyond their reach. They wanted to warehouse me. I'd make sure the right people got locked away. That evening, listening to them discuss Thursday's tour with barely contained excitement, I made final preparations. Marcus would meet me at Golden Years, armed with legal documents, turning their ambush into their downfall. Assets were secured, recordings stored in multiple locations. "After tomorrow, everything changes," Jessica told Barrett, heading upstairs. "By next week, all our problems will be solved." She was right. Everything would change. But their problems were just beginning. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by tools used to build a lifetime of honest work, and smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. Tomorrow I'd show my family what happens when you try to demolish a man who spent his career learning how to bring things down safely and completely. It was time to build the perfect demolition case. The morning of the scheduled tour arrived with crisp Colorado sunshine. Barrett and Jessica discussed final preparations for what they believed would be my surrender. At 1:30, we drove to Golden Years. The building looked like a cross between a hospital and prison, all beige brick and barred windows. Margaret Winters, the admissions director, met us with practiced sympathy. She pulled out a notepad, writing, "Hello, Mr. Edgar. Welcome to Golden Years. How are you feeling?" I read her note and gave a weak smile, nodding like I had for 15 years. She wrote, "We're going to show you around. Let us know if you have questions." I gave her a thumbs up, my trademark response. For 30 minutes, I played my part perfectly. When Margaret wrote questions, I nodded. When she scribbled notes about activities, I smiled politely. Barrett and Jessica grew confident. "And this would be your father's room," Margaret said to them, then wrote for me, "This could be your new home. Private bathroom. Emergency call garden view." Jessica pulled out her pen. "It's perfect for you, Edgar. Safe and comfortable. Don't you think?" I read her note, looked at the sterile space barely larger than a prison cell, then decided the performance had gone long enough. "Actually, Jessica," I said clearly, "I think this is a prison designed to warehouse inconvenient elderly relatives. And no, I don't think it's perfect." The silence was deafening. Margaret's pen froze. Barrett's mouth fell open. Jessica stared in complete shock. "Edgar," Barrett whispered, You can hear us?" "Every word, son. I've been hearing everything for 3 weeks." I pulled out my digital recorder, including conversations while you thought your deaf father was safely out of earshot. Margaret stared between her written notes and me. "You've been able to hear this entire time. Crystal clear. My hearing came back after the accident, but I kept quiet when I heard what my devoted family really thought. I pressed play. Jessica's voice filled the room. We're protecting the disabled elderly man from his own poor judgment. That's our story. Jessica frantically wrote, Edgar, please, we can explain. Stop writing, Jessica. I can hear you fine. I've been hearing you plan to steal my ranch, liquidate my savings, and dump me here. I pressed play again. Barrett's voice, I'm tired of pretending to be the devoted son. That's when I stopped pretending to be the helpless father. Margaret dropped her notepad. We need to end this tour. Actually, you might want to stay, a voice said from the doorway. Marcus Thompson entered with a briefcase. I'm Marcus Thompson, Edgar's attorney. We have legal documents concerning this facility's involvement in attempted elder fraud. Jessica collapsed into the chair. Barrett stood frozen, understanding their plan had collapsed completely. You see, I said, with 30 years of construction foreman authority, when you spend your life building things, you learn exactly how to tear them down. And you two just got demolished. Within hours of that confrontation, the legal machinery I'd set in motion began grinding my son and daughter-in-law into dust. Marcus Thompson hadn't just brought documents to Golden Years. He'd brought a comprehensive legal assault that would strip them of everything they'd tried to steal from me. The first blow landed before we'd even left the parking lot. Marcus served Jessica with a restraining order, preventing her from accessing any of my financial accounts, entering my property, or making any decisions regarding my care. The look on her face as she read the legal papers was worth every sleepless night I'd spent listening to their scheming. This is insane, Jessica protested, her voice shaking. We're his family. We were trying to help him. Help him, Marcus replied coolly. Mrs. Sinclair, we have 3 weeks of recorded conversations where you discuss stealing his assets, lying to medical professionals, and committing guardianship fraud. I'd suggest you contact your own attorney immediately. Barrett stood frozen beside his wife, finally, understanding the magnitude of what they'd unleashed. Dad, surely we can work this out. Family doesn't sue family. Family doesn't steal from family either, son, I replied. But you stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth more to you in a nursing home than in my own house. The second blow came that evening. Marcus had filed criminal complaints with the Colorado Springs Police Department for elder financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Detective Sarah Martinez arrived at my ranch just as Barrett and Jessica were packing their belongings, having been ordered to vacate my property within 48 hours. Mr. Edgar, Detective Martinez said, reviewing the evidence Marcus had provided, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse I've seen. The recorded conversations alone are enough to press charges, but combined with the financial records showing unauthorized access to your accounts. She shook her head, looking at Barrett and Jessica with the disgust reserved for people who prey on their own family members. We estimate they've stolen approximately $50,000 over 18 months, Marcus added. Money that Mr. Edgar had given them voluntarily, which they then used as evidence of his mental incompetence. The third blow was financial devastation. Within 24 hours, I'd filed civil lawsuits, demanding immediate repayment of the $50,000. Plus damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages totaling an additional $100,000. Their house, the one I'd helped them buy 15 years ago, was already mortgaged to the limit. They had no way to pay what they owed me. Edgar, please, Barrett begged as he loaded boxes into his truck. We made mistakes, but we're still your son and daughter-in-law. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Barrett. Where were you planning to put me when you shipped me off to Golden Years? Jessica emerged from the house, carrying her last suitcase, tears streaming down her face. We never meant for it to go this far. We were desperate. Desperate enough to steal from a deaf man, I replied. Desperate enough to lie about his mental capacity. Desperate enough to warehouse him so you could spend his life savings. That's not desperation, Jessica. That's greed. The final blow came a week later. Unable to make their mortgage payments without access to my money, and facing legal bills they couldn't afford, Barrett and Jessica declared bankruptcy. Their house went into foreclosure. Their credit was destroyed. The startup business Barrett had been trying to save with my money collapsed entirely. Marcus delivered the news with professional satisfaction. They've lost everything, Edgar. The house, their savings, their credit rating. Barrett's had to take a job as a bookkeeper for someone else's firm, making a third of what he used to earn. Jessica's working at a retail store. And the criminal charges, they've agreed to a plea deal, probation, community service, and full restitution. They'll be paying you back for years, assuming they can find steady work. I sat in my workshop, the same place where I'd taught Barrett to use tools, where we'd built projects together when he was young. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years building him up, teaching him skills, helping him succeed, and in the end, I'd had to tear him down to protect myself. But some demolitions are necessary. Some structures become so rotten, so dangerous, that the only safe option is complete removal. Barrett and Jessica had become a threat to everything I'd worked for, everyone I cared about. Now they were gone, and I could finally start rebuilding. A month after the dust had settled, I was working in my shop when I heard young voices calling from the front porch. Tommy and Emma had finally come to see me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger. Grandpa Edgar. Tommy's voice carried 16-year-old uncertainty. Can we talk to you? I set down my hammer and found both grandchildren shifting nervously on the porch steps. Tommy had grown taller. Emma's face had lost its childhood roundness. They looked like their parents, but with something different. Something honest their parents had lost. Of course, I said, opening the screen door wide. You're always welcome here. Emma burst into tears, stepping inside. Grandpa, we're so sorry. We had no idea what Mom and Dad were planning. We never would have... Hey now, I said, pulling her into a hug I'd been giving since she was 5. You didn't do anything wrong. This mess is between me and your parents, not us. Tommy hung back, hands in pockets. But we should have known something was wrong. The way they talked about you, sometimes like you were a problem to solve instead of our grandfather. I guided them to the kitchen table, the same place we'd shared countless after-school snacks, before their parents decided I was too much trouble. What your parents did came from their own fears and greed. I explained. It had nothing to do with you and doesn't change how I feel about either of you. But now they're living in that tiny apartment, Emma said, wiping her eyes. They lost everything because of what they did to you. They lost everything because of choices they made. I didn't force them to steal from me or lie about my mental capacity. They did that themselves. Over the next few hours, we talked about everything. Their parents' problems, years of growing family distance, and most importantly, the future. I showed them around the ranch, explaining how the property worked, what needed maintenance, what dreams I'd had for the land. I always thought this place would go to your father, I said in the workshop where I'd taught Barrett. But family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, and real love, not the kind with conditions. Tommy picked up one of my old hammers, testing its weight. Grandpa, would you teach me to build things like you taught Dad? I'd be honored, both of you if you're interested. This ranch has room for all kinds of dreams. Emma nodded eagerly. We want to learn everything. We want to understand what this place meant to you and Grandma Sarah. That evening, watching the Colorado sunset paint the mountains purple and gold, I made a decision that felt more right than anything in years. I'm changing my will, I told them. This ranch, my savings, everything. It's going to you too when I'm gone. Not your parents. You. Tommy and Emma exchanged glances, and I could see the weight of responsibility settling on their young shoulders. We won't let you down, Grandpa, Emma said quietly. I know you won't. You're already better people than your parents ever were. You're going to build something beautiful here, something that honors what came before while creating something entirely new. For the first time in months, I felt hope. Real hope, not just satisfaction at revenge. These kids were the future I'd been building toward all along, even when I didn't realize it. The ranch would live on, just not in the hands I'd originally planned. 6 months later, as I sit on my front porch, watching Tommy and Emma work in the garden, we planted together, I can barely recognize the broken man who woke up in that hospital bed. The sound of their laughter is sweeter than any music I missed during 15 years of silence. The ranch has come alive again. Tommy spends weekends here learning carpentry in the same workshop where I taught his father. He has steady hands and his grandmother, Sarah's patience. Emma helps with bookkeeping and started a vegetable garden producing more tomatoes than we can eat. Grandpa, Emma calls from the tomato plants. Mrs. Henderson wants to know if you can fix her deck. Tell her Tuesday morning. I call back smiling at how naturally we communicate now. No notepad, no exaggerated lip movements. Just normal conversation between people who genuinely care. The legal battles with Barrett and Jessica ended 3 months ago. They're still paying me back in small installments, still living in that cramped apartment. I see Barrett occasionally. He nods politely, but never approaches. I've stopped caring about their opinion. What I've learned is that family isn't about shared DNA or legal obligations. It's about people who show up when life gets difficult, who celebrate your victories without expecting profits, who see you as a person worth loving rather than an asset worth liquidating. Tommy and Emma show up. My neighbor Mrs. Henderson brings casseroles when I'm sick. Marcus Thompson stops by for coffee. Even guys from my old construction crew come for weekend barbecues, swapping stories about projects we built decades ago. This is real family. You know what's funny? I tell Tommy as he joins me on the porch wiping sawdust from his hands. For 15 years, I thought losing my hearing was the worst thing possible. Turns out it was preparation for the real test. What do you mean? Sometimes life strips away everything you think you need. Your health, abilities, even faith in people closest to you. But if you're patient, smart, and willing to fight for what matters, you can build something better than what you lost. Tommy nods thoughtfully. At 16, he's already wiser than his father ever was. Construction taught me that before building anything solid, you must clear away rotten foundation. I continue. Sometimes that means tearing down structures that look fine outside but are rotting within. Emma joins us, settling into her grandmother's rocking chair. Are you talking about Mom and Dad? I'm talking about life, sweetheart. Sometimes you have to demolish the old to build something better. What we're building here, this family, this trust, this unconditional love, will last because it's built on solid ground. As the sun sets behind Colorado mountains painting the sky orange and purple, I feel complete peace. Not just absence of conflict, but genuine contentment. If you're listening and recognize yourself in my situation, if you have family who see you as burden rather than blessing, who mistake kindness for weakness, who confuse love with stupidity, remember this: you are stronger than you think, smarter than they believe, and worth more than they'll ever understand. Don't let anyone demolish your dignity, but don't fear demolishing relationships built on lies, greed, and disrespect. Sometimes the best construction project starts with a clean foundation. Looking back on this journey, I've learned that betrayal stories like mine aren't just about revenge. They're about discovering your true worth when the people closest to you forget it. God gave me the gift of hearing again, not just to expose their lies, but to hear the voices that truly mattered. My grandchildren's laughter, my neighbor's kindness, and the whispered prayers I thought he'd stop listening to. These grandpa stories we share aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that age doesn't mean helplessness, and disability doesn't mean defeat. When Barrett and Jessica saw a burden to be managed, God saw a man worth saving. When they heard silence, he heard strength building in the quiet moments. The construction business taught me that the strongest foundations are built after clearing away the rot. Sometimes God uses betrayal stories to show us which relationships were built on solid ground, and which were just pretty facades hiding decay. My grandchildren proved that real family isn't about blood. It's about showing up caring genuinely and building something beautiful together. To everyone sharing their own grandpa stories in the comments, remember, you are stronger than their greed, wiser than their schemes, and more valuable than they'll ever understand. God doesn't make mistakes when he places challenges in our path. He's preparing us for victories we can't yet imagine. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. Hit that subscribe button and tell me your own story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply let our voices be heard. Your story matters, your voice matters, you matter.